Hey, how are you? So I finished the nightstand and I'm just going to go over all the steps that it took to get here. But real quick, I wanted to talk about this week's, or my newest painting auction. This is a painting of a coffee mug and it's in a walnut spline frame. And the mug was given to me. Ben Davison sent me 2 coffee mugs, which are really nice. Thanks, Ben. And the other day I walked out to the studio with a cup of coffee, finished the coffee, and made this painting. So if you want to check out the auction, I'll have a link in the description. So the first thing to do is to sand. You really have to put your time in. If you want to get a good finish, you have to sand. So I usually start with 150 grit sandpaper. I'll sand the whole cabinet, and then I'll cut all the sharp edges by hand with 220 grit sandpaper, and then I'll sand the whole cabinet again with the orbital sander using 220. So it's 220 by hand and then 220 with the orbital. And my logic there is if I get any kind of cross-grain scratches by hand, the orbital will take them out. Now obviously you're going to have to be careful. You're going to have to be careful with an orbital sander on inside corners. So, but nobody really sees them, so you're better off just sanding by hand into the corner. Once the cabinet was sanded, then I sprayed it with lacquer. I sprayed it with 3 coats of lacquer, and I sanded in between each coat with 320 grit sandpaper. And once the lacquer was dry, I hand rubbed the finish with a product called Wool Lube. And I've mentioned this product before. I'm not exactly sure where to get it. I get it directly from the company. I think people go to hardware stores and home stores trying to find this, and it's one of those things where it's not easy to find. But I'll put a picture of the can up and just do a Google search, and hopefully you can find it that way. So I did change the handles a little bit. I put a slight round over on the top of the handle just to soften it up a little bit. And I filled the nail holes with a wax fill stick. And I think that's okay. I'm not going to give myself a real high grade on that one, but I think it works good enough for this cabinet. Again, I'm treating this cabinet a little bit like a model. One day I want to make something very similar, but a little bit nicer with nicer material. A couple of people really weren't too happy about the trim screws for the drawers. And I understood that. In fact, I thought about removing them and replacing them with walnut dowels, but I didn't have any walnut dowels. And that wouldn't be too hard to do. But it is an easy way to build the drawer because you have your downward clamping pressure with your clamps, and then basically your screws are your clamping pressure. And so once the glue sets up, you can remove the screws and replace them with walnut dowels. And I think that that would look good. That's what I do. All right. A couple of people were wondering, how does the drawer fit in the cabinet with the drawer stop there? And so I'll bring the camera over and explain that a little bit better. It's one of those things where you get it when you get it, but it can be a little confusing. With this drawer design, the back of the drawer is cut off so the bottom of the drawer can slide in, which means there's no material here and the drawer bottom can slide right over the drawer stop. I also added a back to the cabinet, or 2 backs, where the drawers are, and this will help to keep dust out of the cabinet. It's kind of amazing. Look at how light this cherry is compared to this cherry. This will darken up over time, but what a difference, right? So these are attached simply with 2 screws from the bottom. It's not real strong, but it really doesn't need to be. Nobody's really going to be putting any pressure on the cabinet back here. It's just so it looks nicer and helps keep dust out of the cabinet. So on Friday, I'll be doing a lot of organizational work to the shop here. I'm going to try to finally take care of that corner. It's the one behind the table saw, and I try never to shoot the camera that way because it's just such a mess. And I've got an old arc welder over there, and the plan is to get the arc welder out onto the welding pad and put that in the cabinet. So that's going to be Friday's show. And I wanted to thank Lynn from the Darbin Arbor channel. Lynn sent me the raw linseed oil beeswax polish. Can't say it. Anyway, I used this for the drawer lubricant, and the drawers really slide nice. Eventually I'll use it as a finish. I'm looking forward to trying this. I'm going to make a couple of frames out of, I have this piece of wood here. This is an old piece of Douglas fir that's from a church. I don't know if you saw the video, but I built a church altar maybe 2 years ago out of Douglas fir that was reclaimed from the Hurricane Sandy storm. And the builder gave me these beams. I ended up making an altar for the church. So what I'm looking forward to doing is making a couple of frames and just using the beeswax linseed oil polish on those frames with no lacquer, without any polyurethane or anything. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that works. So anyway, I hope to see you on Friday, and thanks for tuning in.